It is my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker for tonight. The topic will be an introduction to spring foraging, and our speaker is pretty well known in the Missouri foraging world and also in the caving world. Kirsten Alvey-Mudd is the executive director of the Missouri Bat Census, and if she wants to give a quick intro on what that is, I'll let her do so. But otherwise, she does a lot of foraging related programs at state parks and conservation areas and all across the state and beyond. So she is certainly an expert in the field, and I'll go ahead and turn it over to her. Thank you, Kirsten.
I don't know if I would call me an expert, but I am fifth generation foraging family and trained chef. I have a master's in culinary arts. So I have spent the bulk of my life expanding on what my family knew, as well as integrating it into everyday food and really cool, fun recipes and great things to do. So how do I forgot how I clicked this thing on to open the screen up. I think that, did I do it or not? Down at the bottom, it just screen share. Okay. Got it. Yay, nice. Go to this. Okay. So we are going to kick it off pretty quick with introduction to spring wild edibles. It is a beautiful time of the year right now, although it's starting to heat up a little bit this week. But a lot of what we're going to focus on tonight is going to be our May-ish blooming flowers and early spring bloomers. We are at the tail end of some of our March, April, May blooming cycles and the beginning end of our early summer blooming cycles. So it's going to have a lot of goodies we're going to try and get in a very short period of time tonight. So we will go accordingly. Our primary objective tonight is to look at a beginner's identification for edible species. Nothing that has any poisonous lookalikes or things that you can easily be able to tell the difference to. I want you guys to have a safe beginner's experience with this. Seasonal harvesting for personal use. So there's different harvest seasons even within each plant. Some plants are fully edible at different times of the year. So we're going to discuss a little bit about what types of parts of plants are edible during this season. And then if you're getting the recording of this, you're going to actually get some printouts that are going to show other seasons that different parts of that particular plant would also be edible in. As a result, we have to know the usable parts for plant identification. Very basic. We are not going into grave detail on this. This is very beginner's end. We're going to talk a lot about sustainable harvesting methods and as well as seasonal harvesting. So when we talk about sustainable harvesting, I'm talking about only taking up to 1/3 of any given patch or area of a particular item that you come upon. That way it leaves plenty behind so that whether it's a rhizome-based or root-based or dropping seed of its own, it has the opportunity to be able to self-seed and reseed and is there for you to use the next year or for the next person to use along the way. Storing and preservation and daily dietary integration kind of go together. There's really no sense in getting into foraging if you're just going to pick it and stare at it. We want you to be able to learn how to eat it, to learn how to be able to store it in the off season so that when you open it up or take it out of the freezer, it is still quite palatable. And many people will get a chance, they'll get out there, they'll try things and they're like, oh, I know everybody said that was great, but I find it disgusting. Sometimes it is not necessarily the actual flavor of the product. It is the way you're preparing it. It is how you stored it ahead of time. So we want to try and make it something that you can actually bring foraging into your daily life with. So as we move forward, these are our beginner's terms. So hopefully everybody knows what the bud is. The bud is the unopened flower on a particular plant or the unopened leaf. Flowers we're going to discuss today, leaves, fruits, branches versus main stems, as well as roots. This diagram doesn't show, but roots and anything below the soil line will also include corms, and corms are like a small nut-shaped tuber. They will also include tubers, and they will include rhizomes, and rhizomes are kind of like a thicker root stalk that small hairy roots will grow off of, because in many cases, rhizomes are actually what we'll be eating. So part of the flowers that we're going to be focusing on, it's beautiful outside. Everything's starting to bloom and come out with all these gorgeous colors. And many of these gorgeous colors that we're seeing are actually very edible. They can be brought in and captured in a variety of different ways for us to be able to enjoy them throughout the year. Wild violets are a great one. These are a good beginning one. If you're going to be out with small children in particular, these are great. The kids are really good at just sitting in a big patch of wild violets and picking. When it comes to getting violets, there are a variety of different species that we have here in Missouri. They range from the white that you can see down below down here, all the way to really dark blue. They can be very small, so they can be about the size of your thumb, or you can actually get some of the bird's foot are about the size of a $50 or even a silver dollar, for those of us that remember what those look like. When it comes to harvesting these guys, and other flowers, primarily what you want to stick with is actually getting the flowers and the petal of the flower. Not so much of the green, not so much of the stem when it involves the flowers. Some of our other great edibles this time of the year are red buds. Redbud trees are, depending on the region in the state that you're coming from, in Northeast Missouri, where I was just at, they are still in full bloom. I know down in Southeast Missouri, they pretty much disappeared and started to turn into leaf already on the trees. Honeysuckle. Boy, honeysuckle, that is a perpetual and ongoing invasive, heavily invasive problem here in our state. They smell beautiful. In some cases, they look beautiful, but they will take over literally everything in their path. So feel free to pick and pluck honeysuckle back to your heart's content. These small flower buds that you're going to see up here on the top edges of these guys are great to make a honeysuckle syrup with, as well as a honeysuckle jelly. They're really good in teas as well. Forsythia, a lot of folks did not realize that forsythia, again, they can be considered invasive in some areas. They are not necessarily native to our regions. And as a result, when they get planted, they can take over pretty decently. They can make a nice hedge. They're beautiful when they bloom out, but beyond that, not so much so. The flowers on them, again, make a beautiful syrup, honey, and teas. But I bet what a lot of you didn't realize is that there's some other spring blooms out there that are edible. Apple blossoms are edible. Elderberry blossoms are edible. Lilac blossoms are edible. And in some cases, our wisteria blossoms are as well. Wisteria is one of those that you kind of want to do in very small moderation, because a little is a lot when it comes to those, and they can have some toxins in them that you don't want to have too many of them build up in your system. But the rest of these are make excellent jellies, and so jellies, syrups, and teas. Spring wildflower blossoms in many cases will become a dried tea. They will become a syrup. They will become a jelly. Or they will be used just to top on top fresh, on top of everything from cupcakes and cakes to cookies to you name it. They're highly edible, very tasty, and they really do brighten up your baked goods in many cases. You'll notice down here in the bottom, dandelions. We'll talk a lot about those here in a little bit, but dandelions are another one that are a great spring bloom that you can use as well. So this is a basic blossom tea recipe. It is equal parts of boiling water to the blossoms, and you're going to steep those for 24 hours to create a tea that you will eventually use to make jellies, honeys, and syrups. And if you're too busy because you're out and about picking blossoms this time of the year, you can make your tea to this portion, strain the blossoms back out of it, wring those out really, really good so you get all of the nice, deep, beautiful color and all of the flavor out of it. And you can actually freeze that tea just like it is, label it, and then when you're stuck in the house on a rainy day, thaw out all of your different teas and make several batches of jellies back to back to back. You don't have to do them immediately. These do freeze really well in just the tea state. The blossoms themselves don't freeze quite as well. So if you're going to try and preserve these, you want to do these as a tea. This is a basic blossom recipe. So pretty much for any blossoms that you're going to pick, you create the tea, then you're going to use 3 cups of the tea that you've got, 4 cups of sugar, 2 tablespoons of lemon juice, and 1 to 2 packages of powdered or liquid pectin to create jelly. From there, most of the jelly packages that you buy over the counter are going to give you a cooked jelly step-by-step recipe. You're going to follow that as the package indicates. I use a homemade jelly that pectin that I make with crab apples and green apples. So mine takes a little bit, it's a little bit different ratio than you will use for over the counter, but we've used this over the counter recipe quite frequently for several of the events that we've done. Make sure that you do have that second extra package of your pectin available, because some of these are lower in sugar content, these blossoms are, than if you were to have a traditional fruit. So as a result, you're either going to need additional pectin or you're going to need to cook that longer on the stove in order to get it to reach that jellied state that you want it to for jellies. So when I make my tea, I put the boiling water over it and I leave the lid off of the jars. I let it sit on the counter till it drops down to room temperature. Once it's reached room temperature, then I do go ahead and put the lid on it and I put it in the refrigerator overnight. Then the next day, I strain it off. If I'm going to use it within the next couple of days, you can put it back in the refrigerator with the blossoms strained off of it. If you're not going to use it within a couple of days, then you need to go ahead and get it in that freezer because it's going to turn on you pretty quick, or it's going to get cloudy, and it's not going to be the quality that you're going to want it to be. But if you get into it like I do, this is what I like. I like to see this beautiful array, like a stained glass window of jellies after I've made, spent an afternoon making jellies. The storage on jellies, these in particular, once you have created these, is you want to keep these stored in a cool, dark place. I had a friend I gave a full rainbow to, and she thought they were gorgeous and set them up in her kitchen window. And within 2 months, they all looked extremely pale and almost completely clear because the sun will bleach these out really quickly on you if you're going to store them that way. Flowers on salads. Oh, we're going to get to those here in a minute. All of these flowers are going to get used on some of the beautiful spring salads that we're able to create. Another fabulous blossom that is extremely tasty are the black locust blossoms. And these guys are really coming on right now here in central Missouri. I can drive down the road and I will smell them with the windows down before I'll actually find the trees. And I'm slowing down and looking roadside to see where the trees are. They've got these beautiful white cascading flowers that come down off of them, extremely, extremely scent heavy. And they're sweet. You could pluck that flower right off of the tree itself and eat it. You can collect the flowers and use those in your tea that you're going to create to make jellies with. You can dry those flowers individually and use those later to create a tea. They can be set, they look gorgeous on a cake, just cascading down over the side. But one of my favorite things to do with these is to make fritters with these guys. So you can literally take the whole clustered stem, dip it in a thinned pancake batter and fry it. And my gosh, are they a treat. You don't even really need powdered sugar or anything else on the top of them. They are excellent for breakfast. I know some folks that will just make traditional pancakes and sprinkle the flower buds right on top of the traditional pancakes and skip the syrup. Extremely tasty. I know folks are going, which locust is which? So this is just a quick shortcut for you to know the difference between a black locust and a honey locust. They both have incredible edible qualities to them. The honey locust tree is going to create a sweet pod that comes in a fall beginners wild edibles program that we teach about. And that sweet pod can actually be cooked down and powdered and created a carob-like sweet powder that you can add to make brownies and a variety of other things, and it gives them a sweet chocolate flavor to different things. So both trees are good to know and identify, but you do need to know the difference between them as the year progresses. What you're looking for this time of the year are the black locusts, and they are going to be the ones like you see on the right here. They're going to have smooth on the actual bark of the tree itself, but when you go to look at the branches of the tree, there's going to be thorns every so often on the branches of the tree. Honey locusts are the ones that have those great big gigantic massive thorns that are sticking out of the entire trunk of the tree and all of the main larger branches as well. So that's a good way to tell the difference between them when you're out in the wilds. So now we're going to get into a little bit more of our greens and some of the things that we're going to look at to build our salads with. Trillium leaves, trillium, and a lot of our lamb's quarter and a lot of our other greens that are going to come up this time of the year. They can build up in specific quantities of things that are not good for you to eat in massive amounts. If you were to eat spinach every meal, every day, you're going to get I can't remember the name of it, oxalic acid reaction. They're going to make you sick. So when it comes to trillium leaves or any of your greens, do it in variation. I tell everybody, everything needs to be done in moderation. Don't eat all of this one day, all of this the next, or you're liable to make yourself pretty sick. Trillium leaves are one of those ones, a little dab will do you. Put it in a salad today, maybe skip it for a day or two, put it in a salad again tomorrow. Trillium in some areas of the state grows in these big, beautiful, huge patches, especially down in your riparian areas, which are down along your creeks and your rivers. Other areas, they're not quite as thick. When you get down sometimes into the Ozark Scenic Riverways, these beautiful Ozark trillium are not quite as thick as this batch like you see over here that are in Northeast Missouri. I think we have 13 or 14 species of trilliums here in the state. The majority of them have this red flower, but you will also have some that have a whitish or a yellowish flower that are going to be in the center. All the types are edible. And you are eating the leaves on these guys, and they have a really light, nutty sunflower seed type flavor to them. They're really, really quite clean and quite crisp. Spiderwort. So these are these are one of my favorite, most stunning flowers to put on top of cupcakes and to decorate cakes with. If you do these in combination with the black locust, my gosh, are they gorgeous. But the flowers of the spiderwort are only going to last you about 24 hours. These guys, you need to really pick the day that you're going to use them. They're beautiful to garnish anything, including salads with, but they do not last long. They actually, if you try to store them in the fridge, turn into a water droplet. You'll go back the next day and there's just a little purple wrinkled up and water droplets that are purple on your paper towel in the refrigerator. However, the leaves and the stems on these guys cook up really nicely, and they're also really good raw. I like to take the stems and you can cut them down to size, about the same size as green beans will be. And then these guys will saute up and taste very similar, like a cross between, it's a mixture of green beans, sweet pea, and asparagus, kind of a blend, a very bright green, sweet green flavor to them. The leaves themselves, when you get to them this time of the year, if you wait, later in the summer and as the heat progresses, all of our green leaves are going to get ruddy and they're going to get very coarse and fibrous. And so now is the prime time of the year to be eating your fresh greens. Virginia Spring Beauties. These guys are absolutely stunning. So they're these little bitty white flowers, and they have a white with a pinkish tone that comes up through the center of them. You're going to note that when you pull these guys up, they've got a little root system at the bottom, and they're going to have this little corm down here. So when you go to create flowers, etc., you can eat these flowers, throw that on in with your salad. If maybe you're doing a chocolate cake, so you want some white flowers in addition for color on that cake, these work really well. These like to grow in carpeted areas, big, huge carpeted areas. I find them a lot down along the riverways. When you go to dig these guys up, that little corm that's down in the bottom, it will create it's got like a nut size. It's a little bit bigger than a traditional almond, about the size of your thumb or a little bit bigger than that. And it tastes like a potato. Takes quite a few to make a nice batch of them, but they will fry up just like potatoes. You can slice them like potatoes. So they're a nice addition, a nice crunch that you can put in a salad as well. So if you want to just do a little bit of crunch, you could toast them up and throw them into your salad as a little crunch. So Virginia Bluebells. So these guys are absolutely stunning. I know 2 weeks ago down on the Ozark Riverways, these guys were like crazy along the banks. They're just starting to pop pretty heavily up in the Northeast Missouri region. And so you can still find them throughout the state here. They have a mild oyster flavor to them. Both the leaves and the flowers themselves do. I have used them frequently in salads. They saute up really nicely and are used in a lot of Asian dishes. I like to use them to make a stuffing with. I have canned just the greens before and saved them to mix into a traditional oyster dressing that my mom used to make. But instead of using oysters, I'm using the greens from these to make an oyster flavor to it. The flowers themselves, I had a lady ask if she could create jelly with them, and you can. I'm not sure why somebody would want an oyster flavored jelly, but if that's your thing, I don't want to deter you from doing it. They do not freeze well beyond that. They can be dried, so you can dry these flowers, and they do have a really a tart, potent flavor to them later to be thrown in again to mix in with a dressing. Maybe you're going to do a seafood cake mixed in with seafood bisque. They work really well in seafood chowders and things of that nature. So henbit, creeping Charlie, and purple dead nettle. Gosh, these you just weed eat the heck out of and mow over in the yard, front yard, side yard, all over the yard at our place. They look very similar. The good news is that neither one of them is going to poison you. So if you don't get the species down right, it's not a big deal one way or the other. The bad news is that the vitamin content in them is a little bit different, and some of the recipes that you're going to use them in are going to be a little bit different. So the henbit, I will mix up and use the greens in salads. I will use the flowers in salads. If you want to spend the time to pluck the tiny little flowers off of both them and the purple dead nettles, they will make an excellent jelly, but it takes a ton of them to get it done. This is a great way to occupy a small child for the afternoon if they want to have something and they really enjoy picking those little flowers. My grandkids really do like to play with these guys. The stems and leaves on these are edible, both cooked and raw. You can throw them in with a pot of greens, which I know everything says, or, you know, pot herbs, but they also saute up really nicely. You can, the stems again can be bundled and sauteed. If you get the stems this time of the year when they're still nice and young and this heat hasn't gotten ahead of us, I like to wrap them in a little bit of prosciutto or a little bit of bacon and then put them in the oven and broil them off with a little sea salt over the top of them. You want to drizzle a little bit about that homemade maple syrup you've got, or even some of your dandelion honey or dandelion jelly that you might be making. And they are a really good side dish to have with your dinner at night. Purple dead nettle. So take a look at the difference between these. I want you to take, so take a look at these guys. So if you'll note the rounded edges on these leaves with these guys versus the clearly heart-shaped with a tip on these, as well as the top of your purple dead nettles, those leaves are going to have purple tints to them. That's part of where the purple dead nettle comes from. Once you've kind of had a chance to see these guys side by side, you get a little better idea that they are not, you know, the same plant and that you can easily tell them apart once you've gotten that down. The nice thing about purple dead nettle is it's got a lot more variance to it. So I will dry purple dead nettle as well as using it raw or cooked. Once you've dried that, those leaves can actually be ground down into a flour additive that can be mixed into your brownie mixes, to your cake mixes, to anything that you want to mix them into. And it's really going to bulk up the greens content for those and your vitamin content. It's going to give you a lot more fiber in there and going to be a lot tastier for you. As we get into more advanced type foraging and you learn how to work with flowers more, you'll learn that you can substitute many of these flowers as up to 1/3 of the traditional flower in any recipe. You can utilize one of these non-traditional flowers in it without it changing too much of the recipe, without you having to add additional egg or perhaps baking soda or baking powder or yeast in order to get it to perform the way you want it to perform as the recipe normally would. Another great favorite one that we all have probably enjoyed as kids are sorrels. So there's I like to refer to it as the saga of sorrels. There is a huge mix-up for many people between clovers and sorrels. So they see this little trifoliate, which are these 3-leaf combination, and they automatically think 3-leaf clovers. Well, that's not the case. These are a little heart-shaped leaf. These guys have these beautiful little yellow flowers, and if you actually break the stems on these or give these guys a little taste, they're going to have a really tart lemon taste to them. As they seed out, they're going to get this little tiny little seed pod right here, and it's a pickle pucker. We used to call them pucker pods when we were kids, and you dare your friend that doesn't know what they're getting into to try a taste of one of these things. I actually will collect these pods and put them into small jars together and put a little bit of vinegar and water combo together on the top of those and pickle them. They work really great in salads. I throw them into marinades. I will use them when I'm making sour bratons and a variety of other things, including cropped and fermented pickles and fermented vegetables. I just made a couple weeks ago a really good wood sorrel for the lemon-based flavor in this. And dandelion caper, lemon caper sauce to go with some fish that we had down at Current River State Park. So remember that it's got a tart lemon profile. So if you can grind these guys up, you can put them in your juice presser and press them and get that fresh, it's going to be green in color, but it will have a fresh, bright, very tart lemony flavor to them. And that juice can be used in everything from creating a tart lemon bar to doing lemon sauces, to just eating the greens fresh and throwing them into your salad. So you've just got a little bite of lemon here, a little bite of lemon there. They create a really good lemon edge vinaigrette. So if you do the juice from this, and then you mix it in with a little bit of your dandelion honey and just a little bit of herbs to go in with it, it really, a little bit of olive oil makes an excellent vinaigrette to go on top of your salads when you're done. These guys, again, they can be done raw or cooked, so you can steam these guys. You can throw them into any dish that you want, just a little hint of lemon flavor with it, or do an entire pot full of them. So when they start to get taller, I will pluck them as long as the stems are nice and tender still. I will just steam or saute the entire thing, and it has a lovely lemon bite to it. Makes a great contrast and additive if you're going to throw it in with some lamb's quarter or some spinach. It gives that lemony tint to it that a lot of people like, and to help cut the flavor and the tartness of those guys. This is what they frequently get mixed up with, which are clovers. So note the difference in these leaves. This is a full-grown, grown-out purple clover. Both purple and white clovers create this really beautiful flower on the top. And when we were kids, you would pluck that flower and you'd pick the pedestals off, and you could suck the sugar out of the back end of these guys. So they have a really sweet sugar content to them. The purple ones make a gorgeous clover jelly, a clover jam, a clover honey. But they are fully edible just like they are. You can throw the whole flower into your salad. You can throw the whole flower in as a garnish on your soup. You can just pick the little buds off the top and sprinkle it like confetti on the top of a cake, a salad. Garnish the top of your steak that you put on the grill last night, sauteed up with, you know, a little bit of the fresh morels you picked and maybe some wild onion, and then pour that over the top of the steak and just put these just a little bit on top for a little bit of sweet flavor. Really good. The leaves and stems on these guys, again, are going to have that bright green, a green combination of a green beanie, asparagus-y edge flavor to it, more on the green beanie end. The later in the summer, again, we get with these guys, they're going to get really fibrous, and those stems are going to be super hard to chew on. So now's the time, if you want to get these, is to go ahead and get these now while they're still young and fresh. So this is one that plagues people sometimes. People tend to be a little bit gun shy of Queen Anne's lace, but once you know how to identify the difference between them and the hemlock, which most people are concerned about having a poisonous look-alike, it's really not a big difficulty whatsoever. These guys are going to have this nice flat top to them as they grow out. They will have a little bit of a crown at first, but they're going to flatten out. They have a black dot that comes in the center of them. So when you're looking in the middle of the pod, there is a black dot normally that rides right into here. They are out all summer long, but the most and biggest characteristic about these, to tell the difference, you can see right here with the poisonous hemlock. The Queen Anne's lace grow in dry ground. Poisonous hemlock are going to grow in wet, swampy areas. So watch for things that are growing in ditches, especially ditches that never dry up. If that ditch is dried up on a regular basis most of the time, it's not got hemlock that's growing in it. It needs a constant water source for it to have in it. You can note here, the top line are your Queen Anne's lace and the bottom line are your hemlock. So you can look at the difference of the leaves and how one has got a more feathery content than the other one does. You can see the upturnment in the flower and how the flowers on the top of the Queen Anne's lace flatten out, like I said, whereas the flowers oops, I don't know why I did that. The flowers on the hemlock are going to be a rounded umbrella most of the time. Here is a key differential. So the stem on the Queen Anne's lace is going to be hairy and it's going to be green. And the stem on your poison hemlock is going to have these purple blood reddish tidbits that are going to run through it, and there's not going to be any hair. The other difference is the root difference on these guys. And so you're going to see the difference in the root for these. When you pull a Queen Anne's lace, or when you pull or when you break its stem, it's going to have a clear scent of carrot to it. It may be mild, especially as the heat of the summer goes on, or you've had several days without rain, but it is a clear carrot scent. And I don't like at all the smell of hemlock and the smell of wild parsley. It's got a, how do I describe what the smell is? I don't know, it almost smells like wet feet. It's just not got a really, it smells like a bad locker room. It's not got a good scent to it at all. So you're going to notice the difference between these pretty easily. And I don't have any fear in teaching these to our new beginners classes. So the story of docks and sorrels. This is a fun one. So dock gets a variety of different things. We have prairie dock, which are flowers, and then we have traditional docks, which are actually an arctium. So in many cases, learning the scientific name that is associated with the common name of any given plant is really kind of important. It's going to give you the background for the family and the basis that these plants have come from. And that's going to tell you a lot about whether these plants are going to be edible or poisonous, or whether they're something that might be an irritant to you, particularly in your stomach, or something you don't want to run the risk to. So burdock is one of these flowers that you're going to see these really pretty little purpley flowers here on them later on in the year. Flowers themselves are not edible. However, the flower bud is, before it buds out, it's got, these guys are in the same family as the artichoke, so they are going to have an artichoke flavor to them, but they're really tiny. Some people don't like to deal with, plucking them and boiling them because it's just a lot of work in order to do that. Burdock are a 2-year harvesting. So the first year that they are in existence, you can harvest the root that's out of them. It's young, it's tender. You can pull the root up. I clean it really good, peel it, slice it, and it's actually called gobo. It's part of an Asian dish. The second year, the stalks are edible. And so you can do the same thing with the stalks that you were doing previously with the roots. This is kind of a better idea of giving you different looks of the different parts of the burdock. So burdock, for many people, they think, oh, that's thistle. It's not thistle, same family, because thistle, again, is similar in nature to the tops of these. You want to get these before this flower starts to bud out at all. When these are all just a little spiky bud still is how you want to get these guys. Right now, they're coming on like this. If you're going to create artichoke with them, or use that artichoke flavor, even if you're going to use it in an Italian soup or something of that nature. This is young burdock when it starts to come up. This is how it looks when it's bigger. So the leaves are edible. You can do a greens with these guys if you want to. It requires quite a little bit of boiling for me to make them palatable, but you can boil them in salt water. I personally don't like them sauteed. Other people may. They plague a lot of farm fields. A lot of people find these growing up in pastures and different places like that. Here is your root. So this is what you're going to be looking for in future years. You want to pull that root the first year and then the stems the next year. So gobo is kind of it's a tradition in the Asian cuisine. It's really crunchy. It's got, depending on the weather and the water content, your soil content, it will have flavor ranges anywhere from an artichoke. Some people say it has a mushroomy flavor to it, a very earthy tone is I think more what they're talking about. Some people think it tastes just like a potato. For me, it tastes more like an earthy artichoke with the crunch of a potato is what I would say would be better. These guys can be eaten, the leaves can be eaten raw, boiled as pot herb. They will get bitter the older they are. So first year is always the best. Early in the spring is always the best. As it starts to heat up this week, probably even a couple more days of heat like this, and they're going to start to get a bitterness to them. That heat really draws the bitter out of them. The stems for these guys, they can get some pretty hardy stems on them, as big around as a quarter sometimes or more. Those guys can be peeled and boiled, and they do taste just like an artichoke. I have actually peeled and boiled the stems, diced them up and used them to create a lamb's quarter, artichoke, and lotus root dip, just like you would a spinach artichoke dip. The roots in these guys, it's going to have an outer harder skin on it like a potato will. You do want to peel that off. They're not very palatable. They could be used again raw in your salad, so you can shred them up julienne or shred them with a grater and throw those right into your salad. Or you can go ahead and they can be boiled, they can be roasted, they can be pickled. You can blanch them and freeze them. You can can them whole. You can can them cut to the shape that you want to use them in. They're extremely versatile and extremely easy to store in a variety of different methods. And thanks to folks that, they've been in the Asian cuisine for a long time. So there are a lot of recipes that you can pull up. If you pull up gobo, you'll find a lot of different recipes for those on the internet. This is your harvesting schedule. Let's see, when are these guys, the stems the best? Well, here's your harvesting schedule for these guys. So the stems are a second year item. And again, earlier in the spring, you want to get these the better. So you're going to look for that second year plant. So if you mowed one off at the corner of the field last year and that puppy has come back up this year, this is the year to go ahead and let it grow up and get those stems off of it. You can peel that stem down, and you'll notice because the first year stem, it's not going to have a lot of fiber to it. It's going to be kind of limp, and it's not going to have the texture of a potato and the crispness to it. So when that stem grows up, if you kind of go to bend it, if it's all kind of weakish, not so much. You want it to have a little give to it, and it's not going to bend. A potato isn't going to bend on you. So if it feels firm, then you're probably in a second year, and you're safe to go ahead and use that and peel that, take care of that. This gives you all of your different seasonal content, when to use them, how to use them, and that will be in the package that you can pick up later or copy later. Early in the spring, which fortunately is when all of the leaves are extremely palatable, they also look alike. I know that as we've all started to watch things pop through the ground in February and March, they all really look alike. So we did do a few comparison shots, both front and back, to give you an idea and the differentials between edible, which is the burdock on your left, and the dock, which is on your far right, versus foxglove and primrose, which are not edible. You don't want to be eating these other two leaves. So when in doubt, pass it up. If you are not sure or not feeling confident in your early spring identification of these guys, then skip it. You don't want to accidentally confuse it with something that is going to give you a problem. So now we're going to get into the docks. So I like to say dock, goose, because docks, again, get called, a variety of different plants get called docks, and there are a variety of different species of dock. We are talking about the Rumex-based species of docks. All of the Rumex-based species are edible. They all look a little bit different. They all have a little bit different flavor profile and qualities to them, but they are all edible. So yellow curly dock is one of my favorites. When they are young, before they've started to sprout up and get these top flowers on them, when they're nice and young and tender like this down here, you're going to notice that they've got a real crippled edge to them. The center spine that runs through that is not going to be super fibrous this early in the year. The nice thing about these guys is I like to make like a wilted lettuce salad with these. I like to do a hot bacon dressing on them, and they're very similar to wilted lettuce in flavor content. If you wait too much longer, once they start to shoot up a stem and a flower starts to begin on these guys, then they are going to get pretty fibrous. They're still edible as a pot herb, and more of a cooked ratio than really as a green. And you will have to strip that center stem out of the middle of it and just use the outer green leaves that are with it, because it's going to be like a bad toothpick. You don't want to have it. But the nice thing about these guys is later on in the year, when they get to this dried state, they're actually harvestable as well. So sometimes as early as August, but generally some closer to the September, October range, these guys will dry out with this beautiful ruddy red brown colors to them. And at this point, they're dry. They're ready for you can literally just run your hands down the stem on these and strip the seed pods off of them. And you can eat them just like that if you want to. You can toast them and throw them in the salad, and they make a great crisp in the salad that you've got, or you can dry them thoroughly and actually grind them down into a flour, and they can be used all by themselves. They don't even need a flour additive in order to create breads and crackers and a variety of bagels. I've got some really good bagel recipes for these too. Curly dock, this is how you can tell it apart from the other docks, is the different type of stems that they have. So this will show you your stems. These are your flowers. In early bloom, this is your flowers as they're still slightly green, and then when they mature to a dried state, they become very translucent and you can see through them, whereas these are still quite green, and you really can't see the translucency through that actual seed pod. The great thing about these is they don't have to be winnowed, so once they dry out like this, you don't have to actually pop the seed out of the pod and winnow it free. That seed pod will provide a little bit of roughage, but it's highly edible, and it will go right through without any issue. Somebody's talking and I can't catch it. So these are your different root classifications, so you can see the different roots that are going to be available on this during the years that roots can be harvested. This is broadleaf dock. So again, it's in the Rumex dock family. Again, it's got a different type of leaf to it. This leaf isn't long and narrow and curly. It's not got that ribbed edge like the other does, but it does still grow a seed pod. Again, still edible leaves. The spine in these, I think, is a little more fibrous than it is in the curly, and so I tend to pull that spine out even in spring sometimes because I don't necessarily like the flavor of it. But the greens on these, still very tasty, very edible. Broadleaf dock. So broadleaf dock, again, it has a different seed pod design on the top of the flowering seeds. Stem is very similar. The root is different. So if you look at the broadleaf dock, that root is not nearly as substantial. So broadleaf for me are not one that I want to pull and deal with the root on. I usually will stick to a curly dock root because it's got a much bigger root, getting a little more bang for my buck when it comes to spending the time to dig them, because you really need to water down around those first, And then you got to dig deep in order to get that root up because it hangs on pretty tight and you don't want to spend all that time doing it and then waste your time for a tiny, skinny little root that isn't going to get you anywhere. Sourdock. Now this is a favorite. This is another one that I like to mix with the curly dock and will do excellent for a wilted lettuce. I like sourdocks in salad. I think the spine in this, in the leaf of these holds up a little bit longer later into the spring. They've got a little bit of a bitter, soury flavor to them, but it gives a nice contrast when you're mixing a salad to have that little, naughty end to the taste bud in it. I do love them a lot in the wilted lettuce salad because they do give that really sour flavor to it and they compare really nicely with a hot dressing, whether it's a hot bacon or a hot olive oil and sweet onion vinaigrette or, any other type of a wilted style. They work really well on. Oh, we're running low on time. So sheep sorrel, this is also a Rumex in the sorrel family. They have these beautiful fish-shaped leaves to these guys. Again, highly edible. There are several lovely soups that you can make using sheep sorrel. Again, the seeds also make a flour. The entire package that we've got on this, we will include for you guys to have, but these are the Rumex Docks and the breakdown on how edible they are, how to dry them. Very soon, the chicory will be blooming. When you look at chicory and dandelion, you want to watch these guys because these are in the Asteraceae family, and a lot of people are allergic to these guys. If you have a ragweed allergy, these set poor Shelley Kalatsky with MDC off. They are not good. She started, picked the dandelions fine, but when she started cooking dandelions to make dandelion jelly, her poor eyes swelled shut on her. So please be cautious of these. If you have a ragweed allergy, use these in small variants until you know how you react to these. This time of the year, ginger is available. It runs rampant in a lot of your riparian areas. You know it's ginger by this closed, beautiful heart-shaped leaf that you've got. You're going to have these gorgeous flowers that you see on the left. And then if you actually break the stem, you're going to smell the ginger flavor. This is a great place where we talk about roots and root digging. This is where you need to really establish a relationship with the management individuals and interpreters within your individual conservation areas, state parks, and federal properties. There is not digging allowed. You can harvest anything above the soil line, and you're not allowed to harvest seed podding. But you can collect any part of the greens as long as it's not a protected plant. If you, however, get to know your officials that are governing those areas, they may allow you special variances or tell you that in this particular area, we're going to have a controlled burn. So you're more than welcome to dig specific roots in this area. Or they know that there is an abundance of wild ginger in the underbrush of their particular district, and they're okay with you digging wild ginger. Watercress is another protected item. So watercress are within springs. If you have a spring on your private property, then you can utilize watercress to your heart's content. If you, however, are getting ready to take watercress off of state or federal springs, that's a no-no. Springs are protected estuaries and you need to leave those alone. These guys are the highly invasive multiflora rose. They are also edible. You can actually do a rose petal jelly with these guys. They dry nicely for teas, and you can make a rose lemonade. There's a variety of different ways that these can be used as well. Oxeye daisies. This is all the breakdowns on when they can be eaten fresh, raw, pickled, and cooked. The flowers can be dried for teas. The leaves this time of the year can be eaten fresh or cooked. The same way with the black-eyed Susans. These guys, the wild sunflowers, not black-eyed Susans. The flower buds on these guys have an artichoke flavor again, but they're very tiny. So it's up to your discretion as to whether you want to go ahead and pull these and cook and harvest them. This is the, I can't see that on the top of this. It pulled this out of my way. Now I went back too far. So, well, we'll go on to dandelions. Dandelions are a solid guy. So you can eat these guys from head to toe pretty much any time of the year. The dandelion greens are great right now, but once those dandelions have shot up a flower and that flower has started to turn into the dispersal pods at the top, those greens will start to get bitter. So you're going to want to start looking for dandelions to eat fresh in a salad pretty quickly. You can eat them later on in the year. They can be used to make dandelion brownies and a variety of different other dishes that we have recipes for, or in a wilted lettuce salad, as long as you don't mind the cuts and the bitters. The roots on these guys can be dried and roasted and used as a substitute in coffee. They can also be ground up and used as a flower additive, which is pretty cool. This time of the year, these tiny little buds down in the very bottom, in the very base of them, can be plucked with your fingers. And you can actually put these in vinegar and water and some salt, and these are a caper. They taste just exactly like the very expensive capers you buy at the store and can be used in all your favorite Italian dishes and other creations. This is the dandelion caper recipe for those of you playing along at home. Wild ramps, in some areas they are just gearing up, and others they have already passed. They are part of the allium family, and they grow generally in carpets on open, glade, sunny areas that have opened up in the edge of the forest, down along your riparian zones. They have this beautiful white stem, but they have a purple up near the top of them, and they have a smell of mild onion. They're actually the wild leek. Of course, we have the ever controversial wild onion. Some people say onion, some people say garlic. It's kind of it's a wild onion garlic combo. Some of these will have more of an onion flavor, some will have more of a garlic flavor. Your palate also influences how this tastes to you. So pull these suckers, and however they taste to you, use them accordingly in dishes across the board. You can use and collect your own seed tops. The seeds can be used and ground into pestos. The greens can be pulled this time of the year when they're nice and tender still, before they've gotten hard and dry and ruddy in the heat. And you can dry them and chop them up and store them just like chives. The white heads that are at the bottom can be eaten fresh. You can pickle these guys. They can be dried and ground up just like you buy onion powder at the grocery store. So there's no sense in purchasing all of that. If you want to get technical, this is actual wild garlic. This is what actual wild garlic looks like. It looks very similar to the wild leek. But in many cases, people prefer the wild onion because it has the garlicky flavor and taste to it for them. Purslane is a highly edible green year-round. It's got more of a waxy, shiny leaf to it. It grows in people have it growing in their sidewalks, along the edge of their driveways. So be careful when you go to pick this and any of your other greens that you've looked at where you've got oil being spilled or road cinders, or where you may have sprayed or had any kind of runoff that could have any kind of chemicals in it that you don't want to have in these. Plantain, we're running out of time. So plantain is another great one. There's a variety of different species here in the state of Missouri. They all create these nice long seed pods. The green leaves on these guys are highly edible, especially now in the spring when they're young and tender. When you get later on in the season, as it gets hot, they can only be cooked, and the seeds on these guys can be toasted and thrown into your salad or ground into a flour as well. Cattails are another one. This time of the year, the entire cattail is edible, but this time of the year is the perfect time for you to harvest those pods at the top. These guys aren't just a corn dog. They are very edible during this time of the year when they're still green and flexible before they have dried out. Oh, when can you get my recipes and resources? Well, I have a whole bunch of recipes that I will probably give to Colton, but he can put up for you guys to have, that we've shared at some of our other Wild Edibles programs. And I have two books that are actually at the publishers and in varying states. One is in the state of editing, and the other one we are in the beginning of photographs for. The photographs I submitted were not high enough resolution, so it's taking us an extra year to have to go back out in the field in order to recreate the photographs that they're going to want for this to be published. But fingers crossed, something will be coming out soon. If you do check on the DNR calendars, I do know that I am already scheduled for Current River State Park almost monthly from now through the end of the year on various programs, as well as we have a couple new ones now that have gone in for Quiver River State Park. So there'll be a couple up there in the Troy area. But the entire rest of this PowerPoint I will give him, so you can feel free to go through it on your own leisure and be able to take a look at recipes and some of the other things that are identifiable for you guys to be able to harvest on your own and enjoy eating. That's about it. Any other questions? We doing good on time?
There is one question.
What you got?
Your husband decided about
Ooh, boy, mushrooms. He's got a mushroom thing. Yeah, he likes this time of the year when I've come home and he will filter through the bags looking to see how many morels I've picked up. Mushrooms are always a favorite. I think the other thing is he really used to really anyway, like when I brought home lilies, lily tubers, and the Missouri evening primrose flowers, because I stuff those with goat cheese and herb, and then we'll bread them and fry them, and they're actually like a traditional Mexican squash flower that's fried, and they are extremely good, really, really good. And I think Queen Anne's lace fritters are pretty good, and he likes fried dandelions. So if I bread dandelions and fry those, they taste like just like mushrooms too. So it's probably another one that he likes. It's kind of hard to pick and choose because we eat a lot of wild, so it's just part of our staple diet on a regular basis. So it's kind of stuck with it one way or the other. I'll kind of tab through the rest of these so they at least end up on the video for you guys. Oh, and that's pretty much it.